What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Benzwerks tutorial. This is Rich from Benzwerks, and this week we got a continuation from last week. Last week we did the front brakes removal, and this week what we did was the rear brakes removal. And what I did is I laid out all the tools that you're going to be needing. First thing is a 3/8 ratchet, half-inch breaker bar, a small brush, a screwdriver, flathead, some type of bungee cord, a half-inch 17mm long socket to remove the bolts, the lug nuts, some brake clean, some type of mat if you're going to be spraying the brake clean. You don't want this stuff getting on your garage and stuff. 3/32 drift punch, and then a regular punch. I have a picture on there on the bottom left of what the punches look like. And then if you're going to remove the rotors, you need a 3/8 16mm socket, a 3/8 T30 torque socket, a hammer, and an 8mm 3/8 socket. Difficulty is hard. It is pretty hard, but I'll show you everything you're going to need. Right now what we're looking at is just showing you what the caliber and the rotor looks like. And then the first thing I do is I grab my 3/32 drift punch, and then in front of the caliber here there's a little hole, and you'll see that there's a pin that holds in the brakes, and I push the pin. You start hitting the punch, and then as you can see here, I'm showing you the retaining clip, the hole, and then the caliber pin. You can see the caliber pins pushed inwards. What I'm doing here is I'm creating space between the brake pad and the pin, and then I use my screwdriver and I kind of just push the pin until I could grab it with my hand. And what I'm doing there is I'm pushing against the retaining clip, so it's not pushing against the pin itself. And then I loosen the brake sensor. I remove the retaining clip, and you can see the space between the pad, and then I push it in more, then I remove the pad, and then I do the same to the other side. I don't push it in all the way, just a little bit, just enough to get the pad out. You don't want to push the piston all the way out and then it gets stuck and it's a whole big problem. So now what I do is, here are your two 16mm bolts. I get my 3/8 ratchet, 3/8 socket, 16mm, and then I loosen those two bolts out. Then what that's going to do is going to have the whole rear caliber off. So now that the caliber is off, I get a bungee cord. You don't have to do this. I like to do it because it doesn't put pressure on the rubber brake hose. I get my bungee cord, and then I just support it on the spring. Like I said before, you don't have to do it, but you know, I just became accustomed to doing it. It's a good thing to do. That way it doesn't build tension on that hose and possibly rip or anything like that. That way you don't have to worry about it. So now what I'm going to do is remove the rotor. Here is that T30 bolt or screw. I get my T30 socket, 3/8 ratchet, loosen that. That's what it looks like. And then what I do is I get my hammer. And if you're strong like me, you just give it three or four hits there, and then voila, the rotor comes off like nothing. But in real life, you're gonna have to hit the hell out of this thing to get this thing loose. So there's kind of hard to see, but there are your brake shoes. And then I just clean off the brake shoe dust. And like I said before, you could put a mat underneath, especially if you're working in your garage. So now I'm reusing the old rotor, but if you had a new rotor, you just line up the holes there. They only line up one way. It's kind of idiot proof, which is great for me. I take the bolt, put it in there, tighten it just like that. Voila. Pretty fast with my hands, as you can see. Then I get my ratchet, tighten it up. Again, pretty fast. Just hold it, tighten it. Don't over tighten it, it will break. And then I kind of just secured the rotor in place. So now I've put my caliber back on, 216mm bolts. Now there is a sensor. If the side that has a sensor is going to have this little connector where the sensor plugs in, what I do is I get an 8mm 3/8 socket, and then I just remove that that connector there, because it's going to make it easier to punch in the pin that goes through the retaining clip. It's actually a inverted Torx bolt, but you could get away with using an 8mm socket. So now get it out the way. Now I'm looking to put in the new pads, but again, these are old pads, but I'm just reusing it. This car didn't actually need pads, not yet at least. So what I do is I would take an old pad, put it on one side, and then on the opposite side take my screwdriver and then push against the piston. And I push it in all the way, because the new pads is going to need a lot of clearance to fit in. So just make note that you're going to have to put something on the opposite side so the piston on the opposite side does not push all the way through, because if it does that, it's going to be nearly impossible to get it back in. So then I put in my new brake pad, and then I do the same thing to the other side. As you can see, it just sprung the brake pad there, and then I will put the new pad in, and then usually fit in tight. So now I got my retaining clip and my pin for the caliber. I take the pin, I put it in the hole, I push down on the retaining clip. This takes a couple tries, you know. I've done these plenty of times before, so it's kind of easy for me. I apply pressure in that retaining clip, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it lines up. You can see it's starting, the pin itself starting to go over the retaining clip. And then it's about to go through the hole of the pad. I continue pushing in. Now, at this point, I want to get my my regular punch and my hammer. You could use just regular punch and a hammer, and then just punch it through. And then just keep punching it through until you can't anymore, and it's all the way through. And then can put back your the brake pad sensor connector. And that should be it for this video. Don't forget to pump the brakes, guys. You don't want to be driving through your driveway. And that's it, guys. Comment, let me know what you think, and any questions, just hit me up.